else in the media would be. But that was always understood as sort of a code for lay off. I have first-hand knowledge of a reporter who was basically yelled and screamed at by executives because that reporter was asking tough questions of James Baker at a news conference. It was a news conference that was being carried live. James Baker was saying, we want to count every vote, and the reporter was peppering him with questions like, well, wait a second, if you want to count every vote, why not go back and find the votes that were not counted because of problems with the Chad? The reporters in New York thought that this was a little too confrontational of a style. Never mind that when Warren Christopher got up there for Gore, the questions were equally tough. There were no complaints about the questioning of Christopher, but because the questions of James Baker were so tough, that reporter was pulled off the story and said, we can't trust you anymore. You didn't handle this story very well. Go back to Washington.
Ronald Reagan's birthday was, for Fox News Channel viewers, something akin to a holy day. This was Ronald Reagan's birthday, and so my assignment was to go to the Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California, and to do live shots from before dawn until dark. There weren't very many people at the Presidential Library. There wasn't a celebration in any organized way going on. You know, there was a class of fourth graders who came to the library that day to take the tour, and they were lined up and they sang Happy Birthday. But that was pretty much the extent of the celebration. They saw my first 3 or 4 live shots, and Mr. Moody called in to say, what is he doing out there? Apparently my live shots weren't celebratory enough, and I was frankly at a bit of a loss as to what to say or do to make it seem like there was a big celebration.
Since dawn, they've been streaming in from all over the country and even parts of Canada and Mexico. Admirers.
So I got in trouble for that one. I got in big trouble for that one. In fact, I was suspended.
What you will see, of course, is intensive discussion about what we call the wedge issues. You'll hear, affirmative action. You'll hear abortion. You'll hear certainly gay rights. God in separation of church and state issues will be on television every single day.
I think this gay marriage thing is going to be an enormous presidential issue. But there again, we have to be fair and balanced. I mean, we can't, run with that.
The stampede of same-sex couples to the altar has accelerated.
President Bush says he's deeply troubled by the hundreds of
2,000 same-sex couples engaged in
2,300 and counting. That's the number of
same-sex couples hoping to get
same-sex couples wanting to same-sex marriage.
Their job, which is what the right-wing Republicans want to do, is to divide America up, ignore the important economic, healthcare, environmental issues, and they do that extremely successfully.
They did start up on gay marriage, but I think that they got sort of blindsided. They all of a sudden couldn't show the usual footage they used to show, because they used to love to show the footage, of course, the parades and the black leather and, the drag queens. Then they had, very kind of normal-looking, dumpy, middle-aged couples getting married and smooching on the steps of City Hall. So I've noticed a certain kind of zest going out of the gay marriage thing, but the opposite, where they've picked up the slack, is on anything to do with religion, anything to do with the Ten Commandments, anything to do with God.
Why is Jesus so popular right now?
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to. I think a lot of people would say that one of the reasons that he's very popular is that Mel Gibson's movie has come out.
George W. Bush, because of all this, he wants to see it, and I'm sure they will set up a special screening there at the White House.
Oh, sure. Well, he's a devout Christian.
Right.
Apparently he prays daily.
Do they think it's about just a movie, just entertainment, or do they think that there's really something bigger at work?
Well, I think they think that there's something bigger at work. September 11th threatened people, and people looked to Jesus for comfort. But number two, a line was drawn around the world between two kinds of religions, two kinds of societies.
Freedom is not this country's gift to the world. Freedom is the Almighty's gift to every man and woman in this world.
Boy, couldn't you just see the elite media tremble over that one? The president knows evoking the deity will anger the secular media. He doesn't care. Talking points applauded.
They're going to push God very, very hard, particularly going up into Bush's re-election.
All of us working together can change America one soul at a time.
The Christian fundamentalist movement is one that believes in we're right, you're wrong, no matter what. And I saw a lot of that at Fox. We're right, you're wrong, no matter what.
The O'Reilly factor is probably the perfect example of everything that's wrong with Fox News Channel. You have stories that are selected primarily to upset liberals and Democrats and prop up the Republican Party. You have a hostility towards guests that disagree with the host. And you have a host who, in service of his conservative politics, will distort facts, will misrepresent things, and will, in some cases, just fabricate.
In the personal story segment tonight, we were surprised to find out that an American who lost his father in the World Trade Center attack had signed an anti-war advertisement that accused the USA itself of terrorism.
Jeremy Glick is the son of a Port Authority worker who died at 9/11, and he had signed an anti-war petition, and O'Reilly had to have him on.
And they were so persistent about getting me on the O'Reilly show because they found out that I was on the advisory board and signed a statement that was against the war, and then I was directly impacted by 9/11. The success that I had on the O'Reilly show had to do with just practice and preparation. I taped the shows, and what I did is I took a stopwatch that I used to use for running sprints in high school, and I would see when he has a hostile guest, and I would time how long it takes for him to cut them off.
I was surprised, and the reason I was surprised is that this ad equates the United States with the terrorists.
I said, I'm shocked that you're surprised, and basically just made the only point I wanted to make.
Our current president now inherited a legacy from his father and inherited a political legacy that's responsible for training militarily, economically, and situating geopolitically the parties involved in the alleged assassination and murder of my father and countless of thousands of others. So I don't see why it's so surprising for you to think that I would come back and want to support.
It is surprising, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it's surprising. You are mouthing a far-left position.
It was extremely intimidating sitting down in the studio because he's really tall. And like, dude, like he lords over you.
You see, I'm sure your beliefs are sincere, but what upsets me is I don't think your father would be approving of this.
Well, actually, my father thought that Bush's presidency was illegitimate.
Maybe he did, but I don't think he'd be equating this country as a terrorist nation.
Well, I wasn't saying that it was necessarily like that.
You
what I'm
signed this
saying
and it absolutely said that.
Jeremy was pretty cool during it, and he was giving his political views, which were very to the left of O'Reilly's.
And he said, oh, I don't really care what you think politically. And I said, obviously you do care, because A, you brought me on the show, and B, I told him that he uses 9/11 and sympathy with the 9/11 families and the lives lost to rationalize his narrow right-wing agenda.
You evoke sympathy with the 9/11 families.
That's a bunch of crap.
So
I've done more for the 9/11 families, by their own admission. I've done more for them than you will ever hope to do.
Okay.
So you keep your mouth shut when you sit me exploiting those people.
You're not representing
and I never represent you. You know why?
Why?
Because you have a warped view of this world and a warped view of this country.
Well, explain that. Let me give you an example.
I'm not going to debate this with you.
Well, let me give you an example of parallel experiences. On September 14th.
Here's the record.
Okay.
All right. You didn't support the action against Afghanistan to remove the Taliban. You were against it.
Why would I want to brutalize and further punish the people in Afghanistan?
Who killed your father?
The people in Afghanistan didn't kill my father.
Sure they did. The Al-Qaeda people were trained there.
The Al-Qaeda people? What about the Afghanistan?
See, I'm more angry about it than you are.
So what about George Bush?
What about George Bush? He had nothing to do with it.
The director, senior, as director.
He had nothing to do with it.
So the people that trained 100,000 mujahideen who were extremists.
I hope your mom isn't watching this. I hope your mother is not watching this.
It's unfair for O'Reilly to evoke both my mom and my father in the interview, especially when I wasn't. You know, I mean, my mom is a grieving widow for a violent, horrific turn in their lives. My dad was only 55. They were working people, working class, middle class. Like, they were not retiring for a while. And their life is basically destroyed. Their life together is destroyed, and destroyed in circumstances that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemies, including Bill O'Reilly.
Because that's it. I'm not going to say anymore.
Okay.
In respect for your father,
September 14th, do you want to know what I was doing?
Shut up.
Oh, please don't tell me to shut up.
In respect for your father, who was a Port Authority worker, fine American who got killed unnecessarily by barbarians.
By radical extremists trained by this government.
Respect
not
for
the
him.
people of America,
I'm not
the people, the ruling class, the small minority.